Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, the podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas and signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I'm really excited to have a special guest on. So we have Catharine Recht, and she is the Director of Advancement for the Frontiers of Flight Museum. And there are a whole host of ways to make fundraising fun. And one of those is through merchandising and things like gift shops. And Frontiers of Flight Museum is one of Dallas's top museums, and they've revamped their museum store recently. So I thought this would be a really fun and unique segment because fundraising it can be more in a fun way, can be much more than just raising money at a gala. It can also be doing things like merchandising and doing things so that people take a piece of your organization with them so that they are top of mind so that you can find, other ways that they can be involved with the organization. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today. And with that, Catharine, welcome. And I'm thrilled to have you here to chat about this.
Thanks so much, Rob. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So share with our listeners what the mission of the Frontiers of Flight Museum is.
So, the mission of the Frontiers of Flight Museum is to educate and motivate and inspire all North Texas youth by presenting aviation and space flight history through exhibits, collections, programming, and STEM curriculum.
That's fantastic. And, the beauty about flight is one of those things, it's just an imagination thing. And the thing is that a lot of us, when we dream, we fly. So, I mean, flying is something that, has been long before, we had airplanes. It's something that really kind of instills the imagination. So I think that's really cool that you really, you focus a lot of your programming on children and kids too. And I'm always interested in how people get involved with organizations and their path to that. So talk a little bit about how you initially got involved with Frontiers of Flight and what got you there from a career perspective.
So, I came from the for profit retail world and got married 3 years ago and got two great stepkids. So, I decided I needed to take a step away from retail so that I could have some time with my family and holidays and all that stuff. The opportunity at Frontiers of Flight Museum became available. My grandfather actually worked for the David Clark Company in Worcester, Massachusetts for 52 years. That is the company that manufactures the spacesuits for NASA and does all of the headphones that you see our military wearing. You see them in movies, you see them on sidelines with coaches. So he was there for 52 years. He was president for 31 years. And so I had just visited the David Clark factory in September of 2023 to do a tour. And so it was top of mind. This opportunity became available. My office overlooks the Apollo 7 landing capsule. So it was kind of a perfect fit. It was going back to, family and history. And I was able to bring a David Clark exhibit to the museum when I first started. And then now my office walls have photos of my grandfather when he was testing out the very first pressure suit.
All right, that is probably the coolest way anyone has ever gotten involved with an organization of anyone I've talked to. Well, first of all, I hope that there is a giant statue of your grandfather out front for being with the same company for 52 years and leading it for over 30 years, because that is
Yes,
just
definitely unique. You don't hear about that often these days.
you definitely don't. Might I ask you, from Worcester, Massachusetts, Texas, how did you wind up here?
So, funny enough, my dad is from Worcester. My mom is from Florida. They met in DC following college. And my mom said, sunny Palm Beach, Florida is going to be a much better place to live than cold and snowy Worcester. So they made the move. And then I was looking for colleges and went to SMU on a tour and got in the car and said that's where I'm going to school. It was the only school I applied to, so thankfully things all worked out. And I got in, and 22 years later, I'm still in Dallas.
Wow, that's a cool path to get here. And how ahead of your time were your parents to be in opposite parts of the country, meet in a third place, and then settle? That's something you hear about now, but not, not of the boomer generation for sure. So that's actually a really cool story about how you got here and how I just love how your family pedigree ties into what you're doing today. That's just a really cool thing. Like when you were a kid. Did you go to that? Did you go there often? Like talk about that, and how I guess how your grandfather influenced your love and passion for flight and aerospace.
Yeah, so we would go spend summers up there with my grandparents. And when I was interviewing for this job, I said, I would go to the factory when I was, 8, 9, 10 years old, and I didn't understand like what I was a part of and what I was seeing. You'd run down the hall and pull all the zippers on the spacesuits for fun. And when I went in 2023, that was when I really kind of understood the enormity of what they were doing and what my grandfather had done. Like, I mean, you name it, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, like he was the one that was down in Houston when the, flights were taking off. He, you know, was super involved. They hand stitch every suit. And there's ladies that have been there since my grandfather was there. So it was great to see them and, meet them. And, they started off when they were, 20 years old, and now they're, in their 60s and 70s still doing the same thing. They just actually did the spacesuits for the Boeing Starliner. So the blue suits that you saw Sonny and Butch go up in were David Clark suits. And they're working on some, new exciting things with NASA right now. So it was definitely cool seeing it from an adult perspective and kind of realizing the magnitude of, what he did and, what the company continues to do from this like really small town in Massachusetts.
That is so cool. And I want to take it back to present day with you and Frontiers of Flight Museum. And you are our first director of advancement who has been on the program. So explain how a director of advancement works within a nonprofit organization, a little bit more about your role.
Perfect. So the director of advancement oversees all of the fundraising for the museum. We do have a membership program at the museum that I also oversee. We handle the marketing, the public relations, the social media, and kind of are a jack of all trades. We've jumped in with the museum store. We've jumped in with some new exhibits that we have going on at the museum. We're a small but mighty team. It's me and my coordinators. There's only two of us in the advancement department, so we are small but mighty, and we work hard and we work well together. We're a small staff in general. We only have 13 full-time staff members at the museum. So we just, we're kind of a jack of all trades. We jump in and help when needed. And the museum store was, definitely needed a refresh. So we were excited to be part of it.
So share with us a little bit about, before we go into kind of how the store, how the store is now, talk about, the process of being like, okay, we need to reimagine this store and the process of working with the organization to really make it what you all want it to be as kind of like a store of the future or kind of propel where you want the organization to be. So talk a little bit about how you all as a group, especially a small and mighty group, decided we're going to invest our time and our resources to revamp the store.
Yeah, so our CEO and president, Abigail Erickson Torres, she started in July of 2023. At the beginning of 2024, she launched what we know as Destination Frontiers. That was to focus on three pillars of improvement in the museum while preserving the history and the importance of everything that had come before us, but also moving the museum into the future. So those pillars included history and exhibits. So everything that we have here, we have over 30,000 artifacts that are at the museum, from space to flight, general aviation, all of that stuff. The other pillars are education and aerospace. So we're trying to educate the next generation in aerospace STEM, not only the traditional models of being a pilot or being an astronaut, but also the non-traditional models, marketing, business, mechanics, engineering, culinary, and then the guest experience, which is where the museum store falls. So we are unique in that we do have an earned revenue stream, which is through our guest experience, our ticket sales, our memberships. We do offer event rentals here for other organizations and corporations to come in and utilize our space for their events. And then we have the museum store. It's right when you walk in, just first thing you see, and it had a great foundation, but we knew we needed to take it to the next level as part of our guest experience pillar.
That's fantastic. And what advice would you give to an organization looking to take basically take that guest experience to the next level?
Yeah, I think we did a lot of, crowdsourcing and engaging with our guests. What do you want to see? What would be some things you want to buy in a museum store? Our look now, our aesthetic is very fresh and clean, very bright, just kind of trying to bring in, we've got a lot of natural sunlight that comes into the museum. So we wanted to capitalize on that, and make it more, of a gift store where you could not only buy the things of aviation and aerospace and those kind of mementos, but also where you could come in and grab a gift. You could pick up something, you're headed to an event that night, you need a little birthday something, or you need a hostess gift. So we now do allow people to come into the museum store without buying admission. They can come in as a museum store guest.
That's really cool. So explain, especially for, because, quite a few of our listeners, they do have gift shops themselves. So explain how you are able to successfully have people come into, because a lot of times when people go to gift stores and museums, they'll go through the museum and it's at the end. Talk
Mm-hmm.
about how you manage the crowd control of that piece of having people come in, not having to go through a museum admission to go to the store.
So it actually works out well because our admissions is tied to our museum store. So when you walk in, one side is the admissions desk, you turn the corner, and then there's the museum store. It's not a forced exit, so you don't have to go through the museum store to exit. So we just allow people to come in. They say at the admissions desk, "Hey, I just want to come in and look around the store and pick up a few things." They're able to go in and then they're just able to go right back out. So we're lucky in that our layout allows for that. And we have had people come in that are just like, "Hey, I know y'all are here. I'm going to, my son's friend's birthday party. I need to grab something for him." Sure, come on in. And then they, just exit on their way out.
Okay, so I have to ask, do you have a favorite item or gift in the store that you're like, gosh, that is just so cool and everyone needs to have one of
Well,
those
so
particular things.
part of this new museum launch is we launched our own brand, which is the Fopham brand. So we now have hats, shirts, coffee mugs, all that kind of stuff. And we really put a lot of effort into the design of these things. So I love, love, love our Fopham brand that we sell in the store. Also, we have just some great books. We are lucky that some of Dallas's great writers who have captured the history of aerospace and aviation and Love Field, which is right behind me, they actually are part of the museum family. So we are able to sell their books in addition to other just iconic aviation aerospace books that people can come in and collect. So I really would say our Fopham brand and our book collection are two of my tops.
That's fantastic. And Fopham is one of those things, like if someone saw it on a heft, they'd be like, okay, what is that? So, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of, it's a good a good conversation starter, especially if you're at something and, you're wanting to go up and talk to somebody. There's no better way than having something that's kind of like, okay, that's cool. That's interesting. I never thought of those four letters together. What is that? And it's really good marketing for the organization. So talk a little bit about, especially because of your role, kind of having your hand in a lot of different pots within the organization. How do you effectively utilize the gift shop as a part of your broader overall marketing? You talked a little bit about the merchandising, but more specifically on the overall marketing strategy.
Yeah, so the museum store is, kind of the first of many renovation projects that we have going on. We have four upcoming projects. So we're using the museum store to kind of market ourselves with the new look and the new feel of the museum. So we are preserving the history and the integrity of the museum that has been, in this building for over 20 years, but we're also bringing a new cleaner aesthetic. We've been in this building for a little over 20 years, and 20 years is the mark where things start needing replacing and they need a freshen up. So we'll have the museum store that we're using to, market our new look and what's coming. Eventually, we are going to renovate our birthday party hangar. We are a hotspot birthday parties. So Senator Kay Bailey Hutchin and her family are supporting that renovation. And then we have a little grab and go eatery area that's been dormant for a little while. We're going to use the museum store aesthetic to reinvigorate that and have a grab and go little area where people can, grab snacks, grab drinks. In a new bright light, it'll be a place where people can come work, they can have coffee, they can, set up shop and, hang out with us. So museum store is just the beginning of a, great marketing strategy to showcase, the changes we're making and the new things we're bringing to the museum and new things for guests to do.
Well, what's fun about this is that this is tying into kind of an overall, rebrand, because that's really what this is. A lot of the initiatives you're doing really feel like a rebrand and a refresh of the organization. Like you said, after 20 years, it's time, that's kind of the time to make those changes that you've been wanting to do for a while. So, what advice would you give to an organization looking to do a rebrand or a refresh? So that they can stay true to the organization, but also feel new and fun and fresh at the same time.
Yeah, I think, when we launched Destination Frontiers, that was kind of the plan was we put together this program and we sat down and we looked at it all on paper and, what does this look like and what areas do we think, need refresh and are going to have the biggest impact when we do the refresh. So we sat down, we started with the museum store just because that was an obvious link. We can bring in new merchandise. We can bring in, new product. We can, still have, the mementos and the airplanes and the space shuttles and all the fun things that kids and the, astronaut ice cream that the kids come in for. But then we can also enhance the gift shop by adding, things that people could come in and, pick up. Then once we decided the store was first, we looked at, okay, birthday parties, that's something that, we do a ton of. Like that would be a good, next step for, our refresh. So it was really sitting down, coming up with a plan. These are the areas we want to, revisit. These are the areas we want to refresh. But then also, we've got to put dollars behind that. We are a nonprofit organization. So we had to reach out to, foundations and organizations to help us fund this project. So we were able through the Hoplitzel Foundation, able to secure the funding to make these renovations. So we had an overarching plan and then we kind of set it in motion in stages. So we are currently on just a little bit, we're taking a little 4-week break from construction so we can all catch up on everything else we have going on. And then we're gonna start swinging the hammers again on the birthday party hangar.
All right. So before I get to my next question, I have to ask this. Have you ever seen anybody come into the gift store and buy something and then they take that gift to the birthday party? Like it's like a last minute. Does anyone do any
I have
last minute
not
gift getting?
I have not seen it yet. I believe that it most likely happens. They're probably just very stealth about it and kind of quietly purchase and walk down the hall to the birthday party with their gift. I would not be surprised. Obviously, the child having the party has a love for aviation and aerospace if they're having their birthday party at the museum. So it would make perfect sense for them to go sneak into the gift shop and buy a little themed gift and bring it down the hall.
I just wanted to go on that little aside because I was like, gosh, that would just be an interesting thing to know if that is happening, if you've seen it yourself. But one thing you were talking about, as a nonprofit, you were saying, you have to figure out what items to put into the store so that they resonate and that they bring in revenue. So talk about some of the ways that Frontiers of Flight goes about deciding which outside items they're going to test and bring into the store.
Yeah, so we have a culture committee, and our culture committee is a group of respected individuals that have been in the retail and the food and beverage industries, and we kind of talked to them and said, what do you think would sell? What do you think are things that are complementary? We started with the new museum store selling jewelry. I personally was like, I don't really know if jewelry is going to work. I'm not so sure about this model. Well, the first weekend, all the jewelry was sold out and it was gone. So I think people are coming in looking for like unique things. So a necklace with, an airplane on it is something that, really took off. So it was a lot of, consulting with people that are invested in the museum and, want to see the museum succeed and saying, hey, what do you look for? We also, myself and our president and CEO, we went out to other museums all around the country. Whenever we were in a museum store, we were taking pictures and we were, looking at, items that may fit in our museum. We obviously have a connection with NASA, so we have a whole NASA section. People love to come in and get a NASA hat or, a t-shirt or a book or a mug. So we, really just consulted with other people. Like, what do you go to a museum store and want to buy? What is something that you want to take away with you and, be a keepsake of, oh, that's when I went to the museum with my grandchild, or, the story behind it. So it was definitely a collaborative process where we, talked to people and, what do you want to see? Then we also went, to other museum stores and talked to them, like, what sells well for you? We have these things called jelly roos. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
No, I want to know more though.
So jelly roos are these just like little tiny stuffed animals that have a little belly that has the water and the beads in it, and you squeeze the jelly roux and the belly pops out. And it's a fun kind of sensory friendly toy for kids. I'd never heard of a jelly roux before. We've already reordered them 3 times. People come in like looking for I'm looking for the panda jelly roux. Do you have the panda? So we've become a jelly roux hotspot. But they're cute little fun, little toys. We've got ones that are little astronauts. But jelly roux are apparently like the hot ticket item now.
That is so cool. And what I appreciated about your answer the most is that you looked beyond your own backyard for what works. And I think a lot of times nonprofits can get stuck in being a little bit too hyper locally focused. And that's actually one of the ways things get stale is you're not bringing in outside things. And it's not that you are going to go to a museum in Chicago and bring everything back to Dallas, but there are probably certain things that you can bring back and it will infuse new energy, not just into the museum, but also into Dallas and the community more broadly, because you're bringing in things that people haven't seen before. And, the jelly roos, perhaps they came from another market. It's interesting how that all works.
Yes, yes. It's interesting how it works. And we also too, we're about to launch a new project, Flight for Good. And Flight for Good is going to be how we partner with other nonprofits in the Dallas area to sell their products. So it not only showcases their products, but it showcases their organization. So we're going to partner with about 4 organizations, and we're going to launch probably mid-June, where we're going to sell unique products to those organizations. It's called the Flight for Good. And it's going to be one section of our store, like a whole corner dedicated to other nonprofits and showcasing, what they do and what they provide.
Well, it's so important to do that because, nonprofits represent a segment of the community at large. And you all have that. And then there's other types of organizations. I know you probably can't divulge the organization specifically, but are they outside of flight and aviation, some of the other nonprofits you're partnering with?
Yes, so they are all outside of flight and aviation. We have an organization that focuses on homelessness, an organization that focuses on food sustainability, an organization that supports students in the juvenile justice system, an organization that provides education funding, and then another organization that works with people in the human trafficking arena. So none of them are related to flight. They're all related to something different, but they're all doing great things in Dallas. And, we just want to support them and, showcase what they do, and then, sell their goods to people that come into our museum.
Well, I think that's fantastic, and it's a way to bring other elements of the Dallas community in there. And it's almost a way, especially when you're doing those things as well, you know, The birthday party hangar is a great place. And yes, the kids go there, but their parents also go there too. And it's one of those ways that they can see if they're volunteering their time at one of the other organizations. It's just another touch point for not just you all, but other organizations to just see how interconnected the community is.
Yes, and that's our goal with this. So we see over 160,000 people in the museum each year. 72,000 of those are children that go through our STEM education program, and 40% of those come from Title I schools. So those are students that don't really have the opportunity to, come to a museum and, see things that, we have on display. And so through our fundraising efforts, we bring them to us. Like we get grants to be able to provide them admission to come in and see the museum. And we're big on if you see it you can be it. We have kids that come in and don't have any idea of things other than being a pilot or being an astronaut. They don't know all the different aspects that go into these programs. And so we want to show them you may not be astronaut material, but someone's got to get that space shuttle up into flight, and there's a lot of work that goes into that, and someone has to promote that space shuttle going into flight, and someone has to prepare the meals that go onto that flight to make sure that they're sustainable to go all the way up into space. So we're really big into the if you see it you can be it model here. And that's what we do when we partner with these organizations, these Title I schools that bring in kids that have no idea that this is all out there and this is something that they can do and they can be.
And that they can get involved in something that they may have never thought that they could be involved in with a skill set that they may already have. And that's what's so cool about that.
Yeah, exactly. We had one kid. I love to tell the story. Our Abby, our CEO, ran into him. He was kind of sitting on a bench, not engaged with the field trip, and she's like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, I want to be a chef, so this isn't interesting to me. So I'm just going to sit here and watch." And she said, "Well, she said, how do you think food gets on airplanes, and how do you think food gets on space shuttles? Like there is a chef behind that." Creating that, researching, developing, coming up with, what are, sustainable meals that can, travel up on a plane and, be warmed up in a, little warmer on an airplane. And, he kind of had this, awe of, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And she's like, well, yeah, that's a whole culinary team that's behind that. It's a whole division of, every aviation company that you work with is, they have a culinary. Well, he popped right up off of his bench and decided he was getting involved because he was missing out on an opportunity. So we show them that it's, anything you want to be, you can, put it in the aviation aerospace industry and make it happen.
That is so cool. And it's so cool that a child got to experience or think about something in a completely different way. And then all of a sudden they went from being that kid, and I think all of us were in spaces as a kid where we were that kid on that bench, to being
Mm-hmm.
an active participant. I just love that story and how that just someone went up, explained to them how they can be a part of it, and then they were fully in. I think that's just so cool. And I wanna turn back to the museum and your retail background. So talk a little bit about displaying and making sure that you're creating effective ways that people can take, they're drawn to it, they pick it up, they don't put it down, they grab it, they go to the cash register, and they take it home to really allow them to take the experience of Frontiers of Flight Museum with them. Talk about some effective ways that you all do that and what advice you would give to an organization looking to do that.
Yeah, I think one of the keys when we set out to design the museum store is we kind of mapped out the layout so that one way of shopping is to know what you want to go to that section to get it. No one likes going to a store and being like, where's this? Where's that? I got to go over here to get this. I got to go over here to get that. So we were really strategic in that, this is our children's area and this is where all of our children's merchandise is. This is where our FOFM branded items are. This is where our book section is. This is where our food, beverage, and sundries area is. And so it made it easy for the consumer to just come in and like, hey, I need a gift for a kid. Okay, head to this section. Or hey, I want to get a book for my dad for his birthday. Okay, great. Head to this section. So we were really strategic on the layout of the museum store. Everything had a purpose and was grouped together. And then also with displays, we want everything to be, elevated and bright and easy for people to find. Nothing is worse than going to a store and like, okay, now I got to dig. Like I've got to, dig to find something. We just wanted to make it easy. Someone, you can come in, you can pick up that candle and then you can, walk away with it. You don't have to, dig through. We have enough merchandise that we have multiples of everything out on display. We restock every morning and every night because, people come in and the kids come in and, they clear out the kids section. So we're constantly restocking and re-merchandising, but it was really important for us that it was an easy store to navigate, an easy store to shop. You knew what you wanted and you could go to that section. So that was kind of our design philosophy. Was we really sat down, we had a big map, and our CEO was great at this. And we drew every little display case, and then we named it, and then we worked with a partner who came in and helped us display it and open the store. The team from Gensler donated all of their services to design the store for us and make it what we wanted it. So we were able to really sit and we had a couple days before our opening where we could put it and then come back the next day and say oh, we don't really like it there, let's move it around. So it gave us the thoughtful flexibility to make it what we wanted. We weren't rushed where we just had to throw open the door and put everything just where it landed. So we were really thoughtful in the actual like curation of the goods that it fit into one of the categories that we were selling, and then put those categories into different parts of the store.
What fantastic advice. And just, making sure that you're putting things strategically. It's so key and it's so important to any successful. And I've been to a lot of really good gift stores, and then you've been to other ones where it just feels very haphazard. And you just gave such wonderful advice as to how to do that in such a thoughtful way. So I really appreciate that. And I know we're coming up on time here, but I always like to end with kind of an in common question. So never asked this one before, so I'm excited to hear your response. And that is, what is one thing that all successful museum or nonprofit stores have in common?
I think that's easy, Rob. I think the answer is passion. Is everyone here is passionate about what we do. We want to see these kids succeed in aviation and aerospace, STEM and careers. And I feel it's the same in other, museums and nonprofits. Is everybody has a passion for the cause, and everybody wants to see the people that they engage with succeed, whether it's, the homelessness crisis or food deprivation. Like everybody wants to see their people succeed. And so I think it's getting that right group of people in there that is just passionate about what we do, and has a family history of it like I do, and really wants to see the next generation succeed. Our uniqueness now is we're in generation space. So the generation that is coming up now, space has always been part of their lives. They don't know any different. There wasn't a time for them where space wasn't a thing. So it's really, cultivating these kids and letting them know how lucky they are to be able to be a part of Generation Space and, be a part. I mean, there's a ship launching today down in Brownsville. Like that's just an everyday thing for them, whereas it wasn't an everyday thing for the generations before them. So I think having that passion for your organization, for your organization's cause, and wanting to grow the impact that we make on people every day is just something we all have in common.
What a fantastic answer. And passion is so important. And I loved how passionately you spoke about FOFM, and as well as just, what it takes to put a capstone on an experience through, something like a store that allows people to take that passion with them. And whether it's, the kid you were talking about with, not being interested because they didn't think that there was a place for them because they wanted to be a chef, to everything else we talked about today. This was really so much fun, and I learned an awful lot, and I know our listeners did as well. So thank you so much, Catherine, for joining us.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And for more information about Frontiers of Flight Museum and their new museum store, please visit flightmuseum.com. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.